Hey everybody, it's Mark again, and I want to discuss if you're having problems with your cuckoo clock and it cuckoos perfectly at 1, 2, all the way up to 10, and then at 11 it might cuckoo 12 times or 13 times, and the same way with 12. I've already talked about, and this is not a regular movement, but I've already talked about the lift lock lever, how it has to come down easily when you lift it up. If it's bent and it's not come down like that, then you need to fix it. For a regular movement, this is a AMS, I believe, movement. But for a regular movement, it's got the spring that comes onto the rack stop lever, which is this lever right here that I'm lifting up. Stand by and let me get one. I'm sorry. Here's the regular movement. It doesn't have the rack and snail on, but this being the rack stop lever, it has this spring right here. Let me get something to point with. It's got this spring right here. Now this spring is designed to make this thing come down quicker. But if your cuckoo clock is cuckooing extra times at the 12 o'clock position, 11 o'clock position, it could be this spring is not doing its job. And so you might have to replace the spring, or like I said in other videos, you take and you wrap this spring, put another coil in it. If I was to wrap it around, putting another coil in it, that would put more tension on this spring. I would have to wrap it this way, but I don't want to damage the spring, so I'm not going to do it. But you can put more tension on the rack stop lever by putting another coil onto the spring. And the purpose, the reason behind that, when you do a function test, if there's not enough tension in the spring, this tab right here is not going to go into the gathering pen cam with gathering pen, or what I like calling the Pac-Man, which is this brass piece right here. It looks like a Pac-Man. There's Pac-Man's mouth. So putting some more tension on that spring will cause that tab to go into the gathering cam with gathering pen. But getting back to this AMS movement, which I believe it is, anyway, if your cuckoo clock is cuckooing just fine up until about 11 or 12, there could be another issue that you have to deal with. This tab right here might have to be bent, or you see the separation between this arm and this arm? If this arm is squeezed together, then on the 12 o'clock position, the rack is going to drop further if it was squeezed together. So therefore, it might cuckoo an extra time on the 11 and 12 o'clock positions. And even though the snail is dirty, right here, this notch right here is 11 o'clock position, and then this is the 12 o'clock position. Or this tab might be bent wrong. It might be bent up, causing this rack to drop further. And so I had a situation today where I drove to a friend's house because he's been working on this clock for a few days, and it's been acting really funny. The movement had a few issues. One, it had a burr on the escapement wheel, bushing, and so we had to broach that out. It had, like I said, it had a few issues. The cam was not, the gathering cam with gathering pen was not correctly positioned. The clock had a few issues, but the biggest issue was this tab was not bent properly, or the space in between this arm and this arm was not proper. I did a few things, so I don't know exactly what fixed the issue, but if this space is smaller, the rack will drop further. And so why it doesn't do it on the 10 o'clock position or the 1 o'clock position, I cannot explain that. I'm not an engineer. I just know how to fix the clocks. And so after taking the movement apart and putting it back together and fixing a few issues, I discovered that it was dropping too far because we counted up these slots and we put a mark on where the 12 o'clock position was, and this lift lock rack stop lever was going higher than the 12 o'clock position on the 12 o'clock and on the 11 o'clock. It was cuckooing 13 times on the 11 o'clock. And so I squeezed these together and I bent this tab, and that resolved the issue. So if your cuckoo clock is working just fine from 1 o'clock to 10 o'clock, but it starts messing up around the 11 o'clock and it cuckoo's extra time, even around the 10 o'clock, make sure that the rack stop lever is dropping freely like this. When I test a movement after I put it back together, I put a lot of pressure on this grate wheel. I put more pressure than what the 275, 320 grams, 1,500 grams, whatever weight you're going to put on it calls for. Putting that extra pressure when it is done cuckooing will tell me whether or not it is properly fixed or not. And of course, this movement here is just a movement that I use to explain these videos, so it's dirty and got a bunch of garbage and needs cleaned and missing some parts and stuff. But if it's a regular movement, whether it's a 25 or 34 or whatever, it's going to have this spring on it. And this spring causes this rack stop lever to drop freely. And this rack stop lever has to be underneath this gathering cam with gathering pen, and there should be some space between the gathering cam with gathering pen and the rack stop lever. So if it's not dropping freely like that, you need to figure out why. It's probably bent somewhere. Along with the lift lock lever, here. It has to be, it has to drop freely also. Plus, on his clock, you couldn't turn the hands that easily. And that's because the escapement wheel pivot hole had a burr on it. And so the escapement wheel wasn't it wasn't allowing the hands to be turned freely. So anyway, I hope y'all enjoyed this video. Please leave me some comments. God bless, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button because it's free to do so.